Gary, ready? Good morning, Rabbi Sai. Today's shir is being sponsored by our favorite doctor, Dr. Avrum Epstein, in memory of my father, Aryeh ben Avram, on the occasion of his yahrzeit. I guess he was named after his grandfather. Once I'm mentioning him, I didn't tell him in person, but he did a phenomenal job in Niftar Yud. You should have heard him in shul. Should be the Balkaira. Menachem Ateh, this competition. Mordechai Aaron, Mordechai Aaron is sponsoring today in memory of my mother, Leah baruch hacohen. Niftar Yud gimmel Teves, may this zechut of learning be a blessing for neshama, and neshama should have an Aliyah. Rabbi said this is a little scary. This is how a certain individual, I'll let you guess his name, learns the daf. First, he lines them up like soldiers. He always has his kid on his lap, and he learns the daf. Here you go. If anybody wants one of these, you got to call him up. He's in Los Angeles. You know this is, right? Reb Harry Shalom. Reb Aaron Shalom, we'll call him. This is from Shlomo Klein. Shlomo Klein, I love this guy, from Crown Heights. We have a special connection. Ever since, the guy, he was in the hospital, we said Tehillim for him, he's COVID, and then we became very close. I was very moved by the story told of Reb Chaim Tzanzer. The story that his mother dipped in the matzah in gebrox, and he said that Kibbutz Avim comes before a minhag. So, Shmuel Eliot left me a message yesterday that he spoke to someone who was zechut to be the chauffeur of the Tzanzer Rebbe, and he confirms the story. The story is the emes story. Someone here had a kasha, how do men and women sit by the Seder? They have a minhag that by the Seder they sit together, men and women. And the story happened slightly different, that the Reb Chaim Tzanzer got up and dipped his matzah in his mother's bowl. They were eating together. So he says, it reminded me of a story I heard as a child once at the Pesach Yontif table of the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchok. There was a Veltische Yid. I don't know what they mean by Veltische Yid. Travel. Yeah, I know, but maybe they mean like a Litvische Yid, who wasn't makbid on gebrox. And he started dipping his matzah in the borscht, the geschmacka borscht. And the other Hasidim were fidgeting, feeling comfortable, murmuring, what should he do? The previous Rebbe noticed this and said, Chas v'shalom, not to say anything to him. Es ist besser die Matzah soll sein roit, either das Ponim soll sein roit. It's better that the matzah should be red than the person's face should be red. Also in regard to your old handmade charts not being for sale, who are you kidding? This is MDY. For the right price, everything is for sale. Also, I'm thanking him amazed that we completed a year. He's amazed that we completed a full year, where I learned the black Gemara almost every day. Minus a couple of weeks in April. Yeah, COVID. May we be zechut to continue on this path and breeze through another year with good health. For all the members of a Chabura, Yesher Koyach, Rabbi Umoiri, Shloimi. Valley Brook Produce. Anybody need produce in New York? Yeah. Oh, good point. Okay, thank you. We have another minute. This is from our favorite in-house scientist, Reb Avi Mandelbaum. We miss him dearly. He's on some very long trip. I love this, he says. Today's Gemara brings up not using warm water. It says in the Gemara, Kula Alma Poishrim is also, you can't use warm water to make matzah. Becomes chametz faster. Chemical kinetics, 100% agrees. Since warmer items have more energy in the molecules will collide more often, proper activation energy fell out in the reaction to happen fast. Listen, Rabbi said, this is just because he's not on today on Zoom before I'll do it for him. This is what you hear. Energy found in the reaction to happen faster. A general rule for reactions at room temperature, an increase of temperature by just 10 degrees Celsius will cut in half the reaction time. Another email. Science 100% backs up the idea in the Gemara that fruit juice will make it become chametz faster. Can show that a higher concentration of reactants will increase the speed of reaction. The reaction to make chametz is the change of sugars to carbon dioxide and alcohol. Increasing the concentration of sugar will make it become... I love it when science and halacha agree. Be'ez Hashem, you'll love it even when science and halacha don't agree. Okay, so there we are. Today is Daf Lamed Zayin. And we are holding on the last line in Lamed Vav Amud Beis. Tanu Rabbanon, Ein Oifin Pas Ova Bepesach. Pas Ova, as the Gemara understands it right now, is a very thick bread. And the thickness, there's a concern. Shalom Aleichem Yaakov. There's a concern that it will become chametz. It's so thick. Divrei Beis Shammai. Ubeis Hillel Matirim, they say it's not a problem. V'kama Pasova. What does this mean, thick? Omer Avuna Tefach. Shekem Etzinu Belechem Aponim Tefach. Lechem Aponim. Now here's a good kasher, Rabbi. So what do you say to this? On Pesach, what kind of lechem Aponim did they use in the Beis Hamikdash? You gotta be careful of chametz though. Okay. Couldn't pull it. The lechem aponim was matzah. It was not chametz. This is just a modern day depiction of one shita, what it looks like. It was a nice thick bread. I already mentioned myself and Levi Friedman. We went to a bakery next to Avigdor Gold's place, Avigdor Fold. And there's a guy there, I forgot where it is, Chatzirin, whatever. He does this all year round. He'll show you how to do lechem aponim. It's very cool. Karnei Shomron, thank you. It was very difficult to make. And they fell apart. He tried really hard, and he's done this 1,000 times. They still fell apart. When you try to take it out of the pan, they're so thick. As the Gemara is going to say now, that you need a little bit of a mumchishkeit, but they're very thick. So since we see by lechem aponim that it's a tefach, and in the Beis Hamikdash, they were makbid that it should become chametz. So you see that a tefach could be matzah, not chametz. Baruch atah adin no yeleinem l'chayilam hacohen liyabit v'roy. Matzkich Rav Yosef. What's the connection? And by the way, when you see through his question, you see how they used to make matzah in those days. They didn't go to Satmar Matzah Bakery under the tracks in Williamsburg and have a whole. They did it at home. Take a little matzah, the dough, real quick, throw it in the oven. Everybody made their own matzah. Im Amru Beis reason, if you're talking about the Beis Hamikdash, that they made a lechem aponim that was a tefach thick, Yomi Pesachim reason. That's why we're going to give you the right. Talking about, I just want to say this quick maisa. I don't know if it has any shaykhs to anything. We're on a flow with Lubavitch Rebbe and Reb Chaim Tzanzer. Rabbi Yisrael Salanter once couldn't make it to the matzah bakery. He couldn't go. He was weak, whatever it was. So his Talmidim asked him, so Rebbe, what should we look out for? What should we be makbid on? Think what he said. What you should be makbid on. At the matzah bakery, all these almanas doing the redla, you got to be careful with an almana. Don't push her too hard. Don't make her meshuga. That's what you have to be makbid on. Im Amru Beis reason, Yomi Pesachim reason. That's a micro. I was just thinking matzah bakery. In those days, no matzah bakery. What matzah bakery? Im Amru Beis reason, huh? But in Satmar, I used to bake in Satmar when I was a kid, and there's only ladies, only the very makbid Russian, and because they're better than the men. I don't know about, maybe in Eretz Yisrael it's different. Im Amru Beis reason, Yomi Pesachim reason. You're talking about in the Beis Hamikdash, the Kohanim, they knew how to make this lechem aponim. They were professionals. You're going to tell every Joe Schmo that he can make a matzah that's a tefach thick, it's going to become chametz. So this is very interesting, because in Menachos we learned, what's pas hamela? Rashi brings it down, but this could be like the MDY a beat. You have to knead this dough, 300 shifa, 500 bita. So you have to go like this, basically. You have to go 1, 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. 1. The kids to try to do it, it's not possible. You have to do 800 of these. 2, 2, 1, 2, 3. 1, 1, 1, 2. Kids, 800. So if they're going to do it, they're working it like that, so it's not going to become chametz. But you at home, you don't know what you're doing. You don't know how to do the beat. In the Beis Hamikdash, they had very dry wood, months old. It lights well. It's hot. That's how they know how to do it. In the Beis Hamikdash, the oven was constantly heated. They were constantly making menachas for everybody. And you just turn on your oven. You think you know what you're doing. In the Beis Hamikdash, they had a metal oven. Everybody in those days had earthenware. What's the connection? Much more heat, professionals. They knew what they were doing. So, bottom line is the Gemara doesn't really tell us how thick. They said it can't be a tefach, so how thick? So if you look in the Shulchan Aruch, the Ramah says in our days, at least Ashkenazim, makpid on doing as thin as possible. The Kaf Chaim also says should be as thin as possible. So that's why we do it thin. Anybody ever wonder why we do round matzahs? I just saw it, because it says ugois matzahs. Ugois lashon agula, he says. So why square by the machine? Because they were very makbid not to have any leftover. When you make it round, so you have all those corners, and they were worried that people are going to take the corners and throw it back into and make another matzah out of it. So they said square, you're not going to have any leftovers. Okay? Zog the Gemara. Omar Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba. She'ilis is Rebbe biyichud. Very interesting. Why exactly, according to the first Pshat and Rashi, says Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba, I asked Rebbe, Umanu Rav, I asked Rav, who is my Rebbe, in private. Another Pshat is, I asked him specifically, very deliberately. Ikad Amri, Omar Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba, Omar Rav, She'ilis is Rebbe biyichud, Umanu Rabbeinu HaKadosh. I asked Rebbe, the author of the Mishnayos, Rabbeinu HaKadosh, as we learned, his name was Kadosh because he never put his hands below his belt. My Passover. So he's a whole different pshat. Until now, Passover, it's a tefach thick, Beis Hamikdash, not Beis Hamikdash. No, Passover, Pas Meruba. There's a lot of it. V'amai korle Passover, mishum denefisha belisha. You're needing a lot, so it's called Passover. B'boy seime ba'asrei da'itano, lepas Meruba, Passover korle. Okay, that was the name. When you want to say a lot of dough, you say Passover. Now, what's the problem? So why can't you make a lot of dough? If the problem is because even on Yontif, you shouldn't be working too much. So why does it mention Pesach? Take out the words Yontif, not. Why does it say Pesach? Nothing to do with Pesach. On Sukkot, the same halacha applies. Nothing to do with matzah. You just happen to be talking about the Yontif of Pesach, but this applies to every Yontif. You can't do tirchi yiseri, you can't make too much dough. And Beis Hillel say, so you see, it doesn't even mention the word Pesach over here. It says, Ein oivim pasava b'yontav. All Yomim Tovim have this halacha, nothing to do with Pesach. And Beis Hillel say it's mutter. How much is mutter? So Teves brings enough to fill up a whole oven's worth, because that helps even that one bread. The one bread that you're baking, if there's a whole oven, it's good. Fine, you get one oven's worth. Tanur Rabbanan. Yoitzin bepas nekiya. Ubadro, I have a riddle here. Yeah.
What do you mean? Because it helps them. Not that it helps the bread. Once you're doing one, you can do a harama to do a lot. Even though you
I saw somebody, I know Teves doesn't say that exactly, but I saw somebody, I think another Rishon somewhere, I think that's what it was. Maybe I might have seen it in Shulchan Aruch even. I saw it somewhere. I know that Teves doesn't say it straight out. I know. Teves himself not. He says a whole oven. What the reason is, I don't remember where I saw it. I did see such a thing. Does anybody remember where we learned when they used to bake the matzah? When did they bake matzah in those days? So I'll give you a hint. It was in this Masechta. No. I'll give you another hint. It had to do with Chulda Neviyahi. Remember that? Chulda Neviyahi. It was a play on words that what? That in those days they would bake the matzah that night. Lela Seder. At the Seder they would bake the matzah. But the Chulda knows that tonight is Pesach and she's going to have food tonight. So in other words, they would bake it that night. Anyway, Torah Rabbanan. Yoitzin bepas nekiya ubahadra. We had this halacha yesterday, that if you remove all the bran from the flour, it's like Shloim HaMelech, Nikia, it's beautiful, it's clean. You think for a second that it's not lechem oini. This is not what poor people eat. They can't afford the sifted flour. Ubesrikin hamitzuyorim bepesach. Srikim mitzuyorim, something like this. And we're talking about maybe something thinner, but designs on the matzah, on whatever you're making. So yahrzeit. If this is what your matzah looks like, you're okay. You even have a depiction of an animal, whatever the thing. So they go in, look at Siman Shin Mem. Siman Shin Mem discusses, you're allowed to cut it on Pesach. Nah, he brings the Shiloh over there. But in terms of the halacha of being yahrzeit matzah, what's the problem? We'll see in a second. Avrum Epstein amru, noisen srikin hamitzurim b'Pesach. You're not allowed to. You're not allowed to make smaller. You're not allowed to make tsiurim, designs and depictions on your matzah. But if you do it, you're yahrzeit. What about what they do today in the matzah bakery? They take that redel and they go like this and they make those small holes. That 100% is allowed. It's not for pictures. I'm just quoting Shulchan Aruch. Omar Rabbi Yehuda. Dover zeh shal baitois ben zoinim lechachamim. So baitois asks chachamim. What's the reason? The lady sits there and designs. I see with my own eyes every few days. Sit there with a knife and cut these things out. It's very difficult. Even this picture, I'm pretty sure this thing has all these designs. These are like handmade. Maybe they have machines that do it, but basically you make like these cuts and eventually it opens up. You have to do it by hand usually. I guess they have machines for it. And her sitting there trying to design out the bread, what's going to happen? It's going to take her more than 18 minutes or whatever the chametz is in Shalom Yisrael. You could use a machine. What's the problem? And it'll be perfect. Kevan, it'll be perfect. People are not going to realize that Baitos has a special machine at home, in his factory, in his bakery, whatever it is. They'll say that he was over here and I could also do it. I once went in after my father, I guess, tzaddik, into Rav Gamliel's place, and they gave him this thing. You're not allowed to do that. So very interesting. This would be reverse of perhaps what we would, if I would ask anybody, they would probably say the opposite of this. A baker is very medayik, it's his parnassus. He has to make sure it's beautiful. So he's going to sit there for a long time and do it. But a woman at home, next. This is similar to what we would probably think. Those guys, they know what they're doing. They do it quickly. They have machines, and they're so used to it. A house person, somebody at home, he's going to make it chametz. That's why you have to be careful. But if you get it from a bakery, then it's mutter on Pesach. If you do it, you have to do it flat, like what we do today, flat matzahs. It's not like some nice puffed up cake or something. Ton Rabbanon hasuvganin, the sponge bread. Baduv shanim is like some honey bread. Biskritin, these are wafers. V'chalas hamasreis. So we have to remember these four because we're going to come back to them. Sponge bread, honey bread, wafers. V'chalas hamasreis. Translation: a pan loaf. V'ameduma. Meduma is basically truma fell into less than 100 of chulin. So it's not bottled to the chulin. P'turim min hachala. So this is the sugya of challah. Here's a question for the Olam, another one like yesterday. What's the shear of challah? Now, the why you guys have a chance to redeem themselves. Elu dvarim shelim shiur. No. 43 ביצים. Kimat. So first of all, very good. We have an Israeli here. He said 23 eggs. First of all, challah doesn't have a shear. It's one of the things that doesn't have a shear. It's not in that Mishnah. It doesn't have a shear. But we take 1/24 24. Yeah, 1/24th, but Beitzim is something else. Yeah. How much challah do you mafresh? No, how much challah you mafresh? The melt. But I don't think it's 23 eggs. I think. Oh, 43. He said 43. That's yeah. That's the shear of challah. But how much do you take and remove? So it's a mashu, but we do 1/24th or 1/48th, depending if you're doing it at home or if you're a baker. A baker only has to take 1/48th, and at home we do 120. What?
5 pounds of dough in order to take challah.
Right, 5 pounds of dough. He's saying it's 43 eggs. Okay. Not really our sugya, but we're talking about what's chayiv and challah and what's not chayiv and challah. So you have these things that are not really breads. A honey bread, a sponge bread, not bread. It's not a geschmacka rye bread in New York. You put it in the machine, and then the lady takes that string that comes off the ceiling. You know that stuff? You remember that? They don't have it anymore. Maybe they do. Okay. Why? Because truma is part of challah. What is this thing? It's the scalded bread, like we said yesterday, like a bagel, something, you cook it. It's not baked. Omer Shlakish. So now we have a machlokes Yochanan and Shlakish. Omer Shlakish. Halalu, those four, the sponge, the honey, the wafers, and the masreis, myself the same. That's something you fry in a pan. A frying pan is not how you bake a bread. Rabbi Yochanan Omar, myself is chayavim, not true. If it's in a pan, you're chayav. V'halalu shasam b'chama. The reason why sufganim, the sponge and the honey and is potter is because you did it in the sun. Sun is different. But if you do it in a frying pan, it says Rabbi Yochanan, you're chayav. Now a frying pan, as we're going to see, Taisus on Amud Beis discusses. We might get into, if we have time, we'll get into sufganiyat. Some very interesting stuff today. Sufganiyat, lakshin kugel, that sort of stuff. Yushalmi kugel, I should say. So we're not discussing deep fry in a frying pan. Maybe a little bit of that Pam stuff that you give it a shtickle spray, like a mashu. If it's deep fried, everybody agrees that it's considered cooked. In order to get it to the situation that perhaps it's baked, it's not deep fried. So again, Rabbi Shlokish says that it's a frying pan, and memela you're potter from challah, it's not bread. And Rabbi Yochanan says it's real bread in a frying pan, and you're chayev b'challah. Meisvei, as the Gemara kasha. Hasuvgonev aduvshonim v'yiskrikin, these are the things that we're talking about. V'yiskritin, oson bilfas chayavim. It can't get any clearer than Rabbi Yochanan. If you make it in a frying pan, chayav, b'chama, pturim. Isn't that Rabbi Yochanan answered a second ago that if you do it in the sun, you're potter? That's not considered baking. No, it should be a checkmate. Tiyufta de Reb Shimon Lakish, Omar Ula, not such a moedik kasha. Here, we'll see Ula soon, very interesting. Ula. Omar Lach, Reb Shimon Lakish can answer to you. When the pan is preheated, and then you put it in the pan, then it'll bake like a bread. You could ask Avi Mendelbaum, he'll tell you. It has a certain amount of degrees, and this, fine. You put the dough into the pan, then you put it on a flame. You ever try to make an egg like that? Hashem Yirachem. You gotta heat it up first, geshmak, then you pour the egg in. So that's the only thing I know how to make. Then you're right. Then it's not baking. That I don't know what it's called. It's very, very weak, and it's not bread, and therefore you're potter from challah. Ask the Gemara. Classic question. So you're giving me two examples to the extreme. One is in a frying pan, you're chayiv b'challah. In the sun, you're potter from challah. Wouldn't it be a lot better if I said two examples in a frying pan? One is 100% chayiv b'challah. One is 100% potter b'challah. One is you preheated it, you chayiv b'challah. One is you didn't preheat it, you potter b'challah. It's beautiful. It's within the same. You don't have to jump to another case. In a frying pan, you chayiv b'challah. But if you bake it, you cooked it in water, it's not the best mikatza l'katza. Says the Gemara, you're right. That is exactly the case. The chama is actually the case of the frying pan. So, Aditani say v'asam b'chama p'turim lifloi v'listening v'didah. B'med dvar ma'amurim kegon shir tiach l'b'soif hidbik. There's one case of heating it up and then putting the dough in. Aval hidbik l'soif tiach p'turim. Says the Gemara, you're right. There's just a word or two missing. B'med dvar ma'amurim. That's what we meant to say. In other words, you're supposed to understand this on your own. B'med dvar ma'amurim shir tiach l'b'soif hidbik. If you heat it up, you put the dough in, then it's regular bread, yichayiv and challah. Aval hidbik ulibsoifer tiach. But if you do in the frying pan, you first put the dough in and then you heat it up. Then it's like you're putting in the sun. We're not jumping to another case. That same case of a frying pan could be similar to somebody baking in the sun. And that is if you put the dough in first and then you put it on the flame. Oh. Just want to say Shalom Aleichem. I'm not going to say Shalom Aleichem to Ezra again from Melbourne, Australia. Israel Shalitsky. Joe Berry, Shalom Aleichem. Rocky, the tour guide. Shalom Aleichem. How are you? Avi Gordon, Shalom Aleichem. And Rabbi Kessler's father is on, I see. Rabbi Yosef Kessler. Okay, Givaldik. We'll go back. The guys in the besmirch don't know what I'm doing. Okay. There's a screen here. There's other people watching. It's not only just... They can hear everything. They hear, they see the whole thing. Toshma, a year ago we didn't know about this. A year ago we didn't. Everybody could be on one screen. It's like there was certain companies, and like Apple Computer might have had it, like a screen, and they did things like that. Yoitzin b'matzah hino tonorabon. Toshma. Yoitzin b'matzah hino u'b'matzah asuyo be'ilfas. Look at this. It says specifically that you could be yoitza in a matzah that's done in a frying pan. Yoitza matzah hina. Hina is a lashon of na, like you have to eat the carbon pesach na, very uncooked, like rawish. So if you have a matzah that's kind of raw, you think that it is chametz. No, you're yoitza with it. And the Gemara is going to explain what that means. But the point that we're trying to get to is the second part. Matzah asuy be'ilpas. If you have a matzah that was baked in a frying pan, you're yaitza. Who does that go according to? Rabbi Yochanan. According to Rabbi Shlokish, is a problem. Aryeh Rish Lakish agreed to this, that if you heat it up, preheat it, and then put the dough in, then it's a great matzah. My matzah, you know. When you break it apart, you don't have strings attached to it. If you don't have the what cheese, like a pizza, like when you separate like a piece of pizza and those strings, you don't have that. If you don't have that, that means that it stopped becoming chametz. There's no more chametz in there. That's a sign, says Rashi, that the chametz is God.
Eli?
Yes.
Can I just ask you if everything's okay?
By me?
Yeah, at home, everything all right? These are like very classic visuals that you would have used if you were busy.
Here. You mean this? You guys don't deserve this stuff. Nah, I'm not going to show you it. Oh my Rav, what cloud? Like, what do you want to see? Oh, you want to see this? I'll tell you after shir why there's not a whole lot going on. How about once every year I miss my alarm? It's possible. Such a zach is possible. Nah, you aren't mechavan. I'm not going to give you the credit that you were mechavan. The same applies to the breads that you bring with the carbon taida. Carbon taida, we had this, something great happened to him, he got out of jail, overcame a disease, brings a lechem, carbon taida with 40 breads, and the 40 breads they could be they could be raw. The Gemara Rashi says in Menachos, we had karmu panel. You have to have a little bit of a crust on top. That, says Rashi, karmu panel coincides with this stringy nothing. They're both the same thing. Pshita, hacha lechem ksiv, v'hacha lechem ksiv. It says in both places the word lechem. What's the difference? Lechem is lechem. By matzah it says lechem oini, and we consider it bread, even though it's raw. Mao the same ahoyel ksiv v'hikriv mimeno, from the lechem taida returning to lamed zayin Amud Beis. Echad mikol karbon. So, we have 4 categories of breads. 30 of them are matzah, 10 of them are chametz. But there's 4 categories. So from each category, from each 10, you give 1 to the kohen, and the Torah says echad. Echad means whole. Echad shliyitol porus. Don't take something broken. Vocha command the priest damya. I would think that since it's so raw, it's like it's cut up, kamash malon, that even by Taida it's not considered cut up, it's considered a shalem, and yahrzeit. Meisvei, hami iso. So we're going to see what this is. Mi'iso, basically you take flour and you put it into boiling water. Or you take boiling water, we're going to see another case, boiling water, 2 cases that are basically identical. Either you take the flour and you pour it into the boiling water, or you take the boiling water, pour it in the flour, and then you do something with the flour, you bake it, whatever you do. Bishamai poitrim, Bishamai said there's no challah, or Bisil mechayvim, there is challah. Hachalito, which we're going to see the difference, Bishamai mechayvim, Bisil poitrim. So we have the reverse. In Mi'iso, Bishamai say potter, Bisil chayav. In Chalito, Bishamai mechayav, Bisil poitrim. Eze Mi'iso, Eze Chalito. Ami'iso, Kemach sha'al gabei, or sha'al gabe, al gabe mugloshin, it's over boil. You pour the flour over the boiling water. Hachalito mugloshim al gabe kemach, you take the boiling water, pour it on the flour. Gemara says there's no difference. At the end, there's no difference between the 2. But right now we're understanding there's a difference. Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Yosi, Omer Mishum Aviv, Zeh v'zeh liptur. So Rabbi Yosi says both chalita, miisa, pour it this way, pour it that way, they're both potter. V'amri lo, Zeh v'zeh l'chiyuv. They're both chayiv. So basically we have already 4 shitas. Either chalita according to Bishamai is mutter and or chalita according to Beis Hillel is mutter, and according to Rabbi Yosi, both are mutter or both are aser. And then we have a 5th shita. Asam bilvas potter. Batano chayav. So they make a distinction between a frying pan, which is potter, it's not considered bread at all. But if it's in the oven, everybody agrees. Chacham say everything is chayav b'chala, whether you pour the water on top of the flour or the flour on top of the water. Oh, you wanted me to bring flour on? Tanakama ma'ishna mi'iso ma'ishna chalita. Says the Tanakama. I'm sorry. According to the Tanakama, what's the nafkamina if you pour the water on the flour in the water? You're right. Absolutely no difference. So now we're going to narrow down the machlokes. We don't have 5 shitas now. It's only 3 things going on. V'tavra. Misha shanazu, loy shanazu. So the brises are basically, they're just saying that a chalita and mi'isa, according to Bishamai potter, and according to Beis Hillel chayiv, or a chalita mi'isa, according to Beis Hillel potter and Bishamai chayiv. We're not dividing the chalita mi'isa. They're both the same halacha. Regardless, whatever it is, it's the same halacha. Bishamai is going to say both are aser, or Bishamai is going to say both are mutter. They're not going to divide, and the Bryce is not going to divide the chalita from the mi'isa. They're the same exact thing. It doesn't make a difference halachically if you pour the water on the flour or pour the flour on the water. The same thing happens. Either Bishamai holds its potter from chala or chayiv from chala. V'zo. And Rabbi Yosi basically is just going in the shita Beis Hillel. Rabbi Yosi said 2 things. Either he said they're both potter or both chayiv. So he was going with Beis Hillel. Either he grabbed this brisa that Beis Hillel said, whatever Beis Hillel said, that's what he went with, depending on the brisa. So Rabbi Yosi doesn't have 2 shitas, and Beis Hillel, the brisa is imchulik what Beis Hillel said. And Rabbi Yosi was just reflecting what the brisa said in Beis Hillel. It was potter. So, sorry. Ktani mias. The bottom line is, from all this, so we have 3 shitas. Either you pour it on, you don't pour it on. What does Chacham say at the end? Depends if it's made in a frying pan or not. Ktani mias, whether you pour the boiling water or you pour the flour onto the boiling water, shason bilpas, potter. This is mafurish that if it's in a frying pan, it's potter. There'll be a bam kasha on Rabbi Yochanan. Betanu chayav. Tiyufta the Rabbi Yochanan. So it's a kasha on Rabbi Yochanan. Just have to find my here we go. Amalach Rabbi Yochanan Tanoihi. It's a very good kasha on me. You're right. But at the end of the day, there's machlokes tanaim, and I go with one of the tanaim. I go with the Tanakama. So you have a kasha from here. I go with somewhere else. The sanyo yochel yemi isa v'chaluto chayom b'chal. You think that's chay b'chal? Tamaloymar lechem. Rabbi Yehuda Omer ein lechem elo ave b'tanur. Comes Rabbi Yehuda along and says, bread, not in the frying pan, only in an oven. Bread, not chaluta, not boiling water, not this. It has to be baked in an oven. Ask the Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda Tanakama. What's he saying differently than Tanakama? Elolav ma'aseh ilfas ekibinayu l'chayra. The whole difference is frying pan. Tanakama sovar ma'aseh ilfas chayavim. Rabbi Yehuda sovar ma'aseh ilfas p'turim. I, Rabbi Yochanan, hold like the Tanakama that a frying pan bread is chayav b'chala. Rabbi Yehuda says frying pan bread is pater b'chala. So you ask me from another brayso that says the chacham hold that a frying pan is pater. I go like this brayso. Tanakama says frying pan is chayav. Says the Gemara, loy. You could be doichet. The kuli alma ma'isa ilfas p'turim. According to everybody, if it's made in a frying pan, potter. And over here we have a machlokes whether you could later on, after whatever you did, you poured boiling water, you poured it on boiling water, then you put in the tanur. Does the final baking create a bread or not? That's a machlokes. The Tanakama sovar kivin shechazav afoy betanur lechem karinam bay. It is considered bread because you put it back in the oven. It's not considered bread unless from the start you started off in an oven. It's not considered bread. If you go back 5 lines, it says, Loi, the kule alma maisa ilfas pturim. Gemara is saying, according to everybody, frying pan bread is not bread. So that's why there's a discussion in Teves. L'chayra, from here you see that the halach is like Rish Lakish. Because it says, Kuli Alm, everybody agrees that Rish Lakish is right, that bread made in a frying pan is not bread. But Teves has a problem. There's only 3 times in the entire Shas, imagine, all those hundreds of machlekes in the Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish, only 3 times was Rish Lakish right. We pass like Rish Lakish. And this is not one of the 3? Okay. I just made a whole bunch of notes here. I have to just pick some stuff out here. So as I mentioned before, that deep fry, something that's deep fried, you don't make hamaitzi. It's considered mevushal. So the Rabbeinu Tam, though, has a shita that sufganiyot that we eat today are a moitzi. Why? Because he says that blila ava, that if it's a thick dough and you deep fry it, or oil, water is the same thing, that would be a moitzi, be chala. So, and the Shulchan Aruch says, no, you don't have to worry about it. Blila ava, that's why we don't make hamaitzi. You don't make a moitzi if you take the blila ava and then you fry it. Even if it looks like bread and you kaveh a suda. It's very interesting. If you, even the Rabbeinu Tam is saying, even if you're chayav b'chala, how are you chayav b'chala if you're making donuts? I guess if you decided to make bread and then you switch you change your mind. So you took challah, you chayav b'chala, and then you decided to make donuts. And so Rabbeinu Tam here, and in brachas, the same daf. So you remember, daf lamed zayin and beis says the same thing. Chayiv and hamaitzi. So at the end of the day, the Ramah says that we're making like the mechaber that we don't make hamaitzi. I don't think anybody ever made hamaitzi on a donut, but you should be careful not, or he says you should try to take a piece of bread and make hamaitzi on it before you eat a donut. As I zokter. Chiddush, no? No, I'm saying even if you took challah. Even if you took challah, you'd be potter from hamaitzi according to mechaber. And you have that other shita, that you're chayiv and challah. So the Ramah says, you know what, in order to be yaitz all shitas, eat a little bread by a Suda. Don't just go into the bakery and grab a donut. If it's sweet bread, like it has a sweet flavor, this dough, then it's passable b'knisnin, and even in the middle of the Suda, you don't have to make hamoitzi. Now, what about Yerushalmi kugel? Yerushalmi kugel doesn't have it doesn't look like bread. So there's machlokes Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach and Reb Elyashiv. This is actually a little bit of a complicated sugya. We discussed it in brachas a little bit. Here, Yerushalmi kugel. You want to see? Where is it? Rudiyas Apas, the whole thing. We missed the whole sugya Rudiyas Apas here, but okay, Yerushalmi here. It's going to make you hungry, no? Yishmak. I haven't been in shul for Kiddush in such a long time. Here in Eretz Yisrael, they invite you to a bar mitzvah, and this is what they serve. That's it. This, a little pickle. So you kaveh a suda on this. This is mamish kvi a suda. So Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach says, since this is cooked, even if you kaveh a suda, you don't make a hamaitzi. Fine, but let's say it'll be different than a bread than cake. A bagel that you do cook and then afterwards you bake is hamaitzi. Why? It looks like bread. But Rabbi Elyashiv says that since you put this in oil and then only afterwards you bake it, it's considered, you do bake it, I guess they throw it in the oven, it's considered bread, says Rabbi Elyashiv. But it has a lot of sugar, it goes through the whole thing. So that's why he says at the end of the day, don't eat a lot of this. Don't eat a lot of this. So there's a guy in our table, he pounds this lakshin kugel, you can't even believe it. People come to our shul just to watch this guy pound the lakshin kugel. But Reb Nisim Karela says, if he eats kedei svia, if he's mamish full from the lakshin kugel, even though it's chaluto lebesoy fafa, it was done at first in oil and then baked, he has to make a birkas hamazon, according to Reb Nisim Karela. Fine. So that's lakshin kugel, that's a little bit of... I don't know. I'm hungry now and I want some lakshin kugel.
What are you, Tuki?
I don't know what you're talking about, but it sounds funny. What Country Yossi says that Tuki eats lakshin kugel? All right. Weiter. Where are we holding? Omarava. Where are we? Like 15 lines from the bottom. Omarava. My type of the Rabbi Yehuda. I think it's fascinating. The Gemara brings a Aryeh from the Techacha that 10 women are not going to have, they're going to be so poor they won't have enough fuel to make the bread. They're all going to have to share the same oven. But we learn from there, lechem ha'ofer b'tanur echad, kori lechem, v'shein ofer b'tanur echad, and kori lechem. Over here, since you have to use two devices, you have to first put it in a frying pan and then put it in the oven. That's not tanur echad, that's not considered bread. Like you would go all the way to the chacha and think that a curse to Klal Yisrael is, okay, it's a curse, but you see that there's limudim there as well. We say it under our breath, we barely know what's going on. There's a limud. Yosef Rabbi Rav Yosef, Achoyer de Reb Zera, the Yosef Reb Zera Kamei de Ula. Omalei Rabbi Reb Zera. So, I don't like to depict Tanaim, but this is just for demonstration purposes only, seriously. Just like, in case you get confused. This is Ula. And here is Reb Zera. And here's Rabbi and Rav Yosef. It went in a very specific order in those days. Who could sit next to the Tana? Who's going to be closer? The bigger Talmud Chacham, the elder. It went in a certain order. So Rabbi and Rav Yosef had questions. They wouldn't go directly to Ula. They asked Reb Zera, who's sitting in front of Ula. Again, so Yosef, Rabbi and Rav Yosef, Achoyer de Reb Zera. They were sitting behind Reb Zera. The Yosef Reb Zera Kamei de Ula. I didn't put beards, yarmulkes, nothing. Just as a stick. I just wanted not a depiction, Chas v'Shalom. Do me a favor. So Rabba says, Reb Zera, ask Ula. Hidbik bifnim v'rtiach mibachutz ma'u. There's a whole, like, we just blew by the whole sugi of this past, but Hidbik is a lashon of, in those days, they would take the bread and slap it over to the side of the oven, but over here we're talking about what happens if he glues it to the frying pan and then he puts the flame underneath it. Omer lei, my emelei. Tells him Reb Zera, what am I going to ask Rebbe? So they didn't have the chutzpah sort of to yell over Reb Zera and ask a question. That's not how you do it. You go in order. You ask him to ask him. If I even ask this question, hey, that's exactly the whole machlokes, the whole hacohen, the whole thing that we just discussed, the whole sugya. That's a frying pan. Then you put the flame underneath. So the second one, Rabbi Yosef says, you know what? Reb Zera, do me a favor. So ask him something else. What if you put it in the frying pan and the flame is not underneath it, but it's above it? Meaning, let's say the flame is next to it and the flame comes, I don't know exactly how it's above it. Huh? Maybe even like this. Like this. This is, I would say this is also above it. I mean, the flame is directly to the bread versus behind a piece of metal frying pan. Why should I ask him such a thing? What do you mean? Poor people who don't have fuel. Imagine the poverty in those days. They had just enough fuel to give it a little bit of a burn and eat it. They didn't have enough fuel to keep it there for that extra minute from underneath. So they would always singe it from the top. No, that's what they did. No shayla b'chalal. So that's exactly what a frying pan is. Frying pans are sometimes from the top, sometimes from the bottom, but that's the exact machlokes that we're discussing. Have a wonderful day. Shema Elohim Makim K'sicha Adonai. Adonai. Shema B'Kali. Gadol Miyamoid. Muchas Licha Leman Tivorei. Ki Yisad Elokim Tzanam Shem Dvorei Cholti. Nafil Adonai Shemrim LaBoiker Shemrim LaBoiker. Israel, the Nagin, Chesed, Avim Epstein. We've done this from Mekalav and Yisrael, and Israel, and